Shannon Allen. We're just going to give a moment for others to join us before we get started. But for the moment, we just need you to click on the link so that we can see who is submitting different comments. And that way we can acknowledge you as you send your comments and we read out any questions you have. So if you can see us, please go ahead, shoot a quick comment so that we know that you guys can see us. And by the way, we know there's a 40-second delay, so we know it's going to take a couple of seconds for you to see this.
Yeah, I see Keith in there.
Yep, Keith says loud and clear. Perfect. Thank you, Keith. So in that case, we're going to go ahead and get started. So guys, thank you all once again for joining us here, again, with myself and my business partner, Mr. Shannon Allen. Today, we're going to talk to you about COVID-19 and success in the post-COVID-19 New World Order, if you will. So we'll start with Shannon. Shannon, can you just introduce yourself, your title, and our business a little bit?
Awesome. Well, to introduce both of us, I'm Shannon Allen. I'm the CEO of Metropolitan Strategies. And, again, we have the host, James LeGrand, our Chief Operating Officer. And we're here. We do sourcing of mass production materials from startup level to stadium level. So we have a lot to share with you today, and glad to be with you.
You got it. And my name is James LeGrand. I'm the Chief Operations Officer for Metropolitan Strategies. I've got 28 years in financial services, and Shannon and I have been in business for some time now. We're both friends as well as great business partners, and we definitely look forward to sharing with you today. So Shannon, you want to talk a little bit about Metropolitan Strategies, what we do, and all that?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, as you can see with what James is showing in the slides over here, we have our interesting website that you can see over here in the display. Basically, you can visit metropolitanstrategies.com to get more information. But what we do is that we do a lot of mass production of primarily textiles. That was our bread and butter, but we had to adapt in this day. But right now, we still do a lot of mass production for, from startups to sports teams, stadiums, even a lot of organizations. So we work with a lot of different organizations, and things have been moving, interestingly, since we started in 2016. Seems like that long ago.
It does.
Wait, James, next page is loading. So you can see that we've had our materials featured even with the Lakers. We're working with a lot of different teams. Working with the Atlanta Braves, working with a lot of different organizations right now. So in this image that you see right now to the right, you can see one of the people that are singing the national anthem for the Lakers holding one of our custom scarves. So that was pretty awesome. So scroll down to the next page, James. And in this page, you can see that we specialize in ready-made garments, denim, activewear, home textiles. If you can wear it or use it in your house, we can source it. So that's really what Metropolitan Strategies is about, is making sure that people can get what they need for their everyday lifestyle. When it seems like, is it loading okay, James?
No, it looks like it's blinking. It's blinking a little bit. It's okay. Keep going.
Yeah, I got sidetracked by the blinking.
Yeah, it's not completely loading. It's okay. We'll get through it.
Okay, awesome. Okay, well, it's a big file. So,
yeah.
And then again, everybody can definitely look at metropolitanstrategies.com to get a real feel for it outside of the interesting blinking that we have going on.
There we go.
Yeah, perfect. So what you see here on the left, you see our Instagram. So if you go on our Instagram, it's Instagram/Metropolitan Strategies. But you can see a lot of things that we're into. We're official vendors for Rolls-Royce Motor Cars, North America. We are the official clothing and uniform provider for the ALSD, and that's the Association for Luxury Suite Directors, as well as IAVM, which is the International Association of Venue Managers, um, the NSF, the National Sports Forum, and the GMCVB, which you see right there is the Greater Miami Beach Convention and Visitors Bureau. So we keep ourselves busy working with a lot of organizations that work with a lot of different companies, whether they be hotels or teams, stadiums, or startups. So definitely follow us on Instagram and our other social media as well. Uh, and if James goes ahead one more slide, you'll see some of the fun images of some of the works that we've done outside of the blinking. You'll see right now what I can see is I can see one of the custom scarves that we did for the Sacramento Kings, and also when and if the other images decide to load, you can see some other scarves. You can see some of the other shirts and some of the other uniforms that we specialize in providing for a lot of high end companies right now. That damn blinking, James.
Yeah, I know. It's what it is. It's just the images. I know.
It's okay. Okay. So, and then what you see here is we did some custom towels for the San Francisco 49ers. You can see we had our tags in there. So we did some VIP towels for the premium seat holders. You can see some of the polos that we did for Rolls-Royce Motor Cars. And then also you can see our team that when we went to the ALSD and we were at the Chicago Cubs stadium with their World Series championship. And you can see me with the scarf on standing next to Eric Spoelstra, the head coach of the Heat. So we work with some very interesting people. And we look forward to working with a lot of others. Hopefully from this conference. So you can see here in the timing and phases area that it showcases how we work from concept all the way to delivery. Servicing startups to stadiums, and then I believe that after this call, we might be able to make this available for people to see all the way. So, yeah, I think that we'll be able to make the PDF downloadable, James.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So we get to this point where we'll tell a story about James and I going to the last conference. We went to the National Sports Forum in Atlanta, and we knew that the coronavirus was coming. So it was I live in Miami and James lives in Orlando, so we decided to drive up. And driving up, we did an amazing brainstorm where we basically accepted the pivot that was coming. So, James, can we slide to you on that?
Absolutely. So what happened was, when we were in transit between Atlanta and Florida, Shannon and I started thinking about China, really. At the time that we were in the car, China was going through their big COVID-19 escalation. So we were wondering, hey, China always sends supply to the United States. Is there any way that we could do the same thing in supplying China with masks, with hand sanitizer, with gowns and medical equipment of that nature? What stopped us in the process there was that China began to confiscate any materials coming into China that medical profession could use there. So we completely kiboshed that idea and said, okay, we can't ship to China, but then did the other pivot and said, well, what's happening in China is more than likely going to come to the United States. Can we somehow get ahead of this and be ready so that if the United States needs medical personal protection equipment, then that we're ready? So we began working with our contacts in China, which is where we have everything manufactured. We do custom textiles, as Shannon mentioned. We have everything manufactured in China, and the person that we work with, for the most part, has access to all different types of manufacturers and across different areas within Asia. So we began talking to him about how could we begin importing personal protection equipment into the United States. And we're thankful that we were early on that. We were able to shift our business because, as Shannon mentioned, most of our clients are sports teams, whether that be basketball, baseball, soccer, hockey, the stadiums were emptying, right? They decided to cancel or put their seasons on hold. So our major clients were no longer really working with us because they weren't bringing in any revenue. So thankfully, again, we were able to pivot because we saw what was coming. And in doing so, we were able to find other clientele, other prospects that needed personal protection equipment. So using our existing relationships in Asia, we were able to not only continue our business, not only to survive, but to thrive. And we're very fortunate that we were able to see things coming. And you'll see that we're going to talk a little bit about our story, but right now we're going to really get into what are the 9 elements of success in the COVID-19 new normal. We know that the world is forever changed. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Shannon and I are going to bounce back and forth. We have a lot of slides to go through, and we look forward to taking all your questions. Someone just asked, how do you get clients like these big teams? Great question. I'll answer that now. We were able to actually get a lot of our big clients through some of those conventions that Shannon just mentioned. So by being a part of the inside for these different clients where they exist, we were able to actually share with them what we could provide to them. We were able to understand their pain points and then show them the value that we can provide as a company. And it always starts out a little bit slow. They saw us at a couple of conventions, saw that we were here to stay, so we were a stable company. They liked us as individuals, and then we were able to move forward and be able to move into a prospect relationship and then a client relationship. So great question, Manish. Thank you for that. So let's jump into it. Let's start with the 9 elements of success in the post-COVID-19 new normal. So we're going to start with accept and pivot. So what do we mean by that? So number 1, whether you believe that COVID-19 is real or fake, or whether it's naturally occurring or man-made, it really doesn't matter. What's for certain is that there is a response that we as a country and as a government have to COVID-19 that is going to be disruptive. It's already been disruptive, and we need to take that seriously. So we need to really consider how is not only the illness of COVID-19 affecting our society, but the response to it. That's critical to understand. It doesn't matter. You can debate COVID-19, all different ways, and there are people who really want to talk about that. But I postulate that we need to be considering, what do we do about it? How do we adjust our businesses for this new normal? Because this is a new normal. So whether it was man-made or not, whether it was out of Wuhan or naturally occurring, doesn't really matter. We need to understand how we're going to deal with that. Understood? All right. So the next question then is, what does it mean that this world has changed and that we're never going back? So just looking at what the World Health Organization has put out in terms of material, they're currently on a monthly basis utilizing 89 million masks, 30 million gowns, 1.59 million goggles, 76 million gloves, 2.9 million liters of hand sanitizer. And that's just for the frontline responders. What about your business? What does your business need, and can you get hold of it? If we're looking at these types of numbers just for the frontline operations to exist, if you own a restaurant and you need gloves, you need masks, you need hand sanitizer, can you get it? Do you have the relationships in place yet in order to begin bringing in that material? You need to begin pivoting now, but even before you open, to establish those relationships and make sure you have everything that you need. If you don't, you're going to find yourself behind the 8 ball while everyone else is good to go. All right, so next up, we need to accept, and forgive me, we've got these things flashing up on the screen here. You do need to accept that we are in a new normal, and you need to adjust your thinking, your business, and your lifestyle. This isn't just about business, but what about you personally? Does your family need masks? Do you need hand sanitizer? Do you need gloves? Where are you getting those from, and what's a fair price to pay for those? You need to stop thinking so much about the conspiracy theories that are out there, and those are all fun debates to have. But unless you're truly considering what you need to sustain your business and your family, I think you're wasting your time. Accept that this is real, and then pivot, not just your business, but also your personal life.
You hit it on the head.
You got it. So next up, we're going to talk about shifting to a new client experience model. And I'm going to lean on Shannon to start that conversation.
Okay, definitely. So with this point, with all James said, whether people believe it or not, everybody's going through this all around the world. It's not an isolated thing to any country. Everybody's going through it at the same time. And many people are learning. It's information that's out there. You don't know what information is and disinformation. But at the end of the day, if you're a company and you want to do business with people, you have to make them feel comfortable. So, what do we have to do to make people feel comfortable to come out of the house and feel like they can actually go into your establishment, utilize your services, utilize your business? If you're a restaurant, what does it take to have people actually come in and eat and sit there? Because people are not going to do takeout forever. People want to have that communal feeling to be able to come into a restaurant again. Um, we do a lot of business in Asia, whether it be China, Vietnam, Hong Kong. Over there, they're adapting faster than us because they had to deal with it earlier than we did. So, what are they doing to allow people to go into restaurants and eat? What are the best practices that are working and what are the things that are not working? And understanding that ahead of time is key rather than just going off of American intuition. Because if they went through it already, what did they do? What are the best practices? And how can we learn from them to be able to make the learning curve sharper and to be able to start making money to be able to bring people in? So that means we got to figure out how to have face-to-face business happen. And face-to-face business now in the restaurant business, the person that's the chef is going to definitely look like a doctor now. They're going to have to wear a face mask, they're going to have to wear a face shield, they're going to be wearing gloves, they're going to be using hand sanitizer all the time. And just like how James said, they're basically competing with the healthcare workers now. So there's a lot of people that had issues getting with the supply chain, getting masks and getting other things just for the healthcare workers for frontline. Now, what about the restaurants? What about the stadiums? What about the everyday company that's going to have to open up soon? They're going to have some form of PPE to be able to be taken seriously, for people to feel comfortable. So to protect your business from the pandemic in the future, because there's going to be some type of quote unquote second and third and fourth wave, how do we adapt to that and then make the people feel comfortable? So at the end of the day, it's about making people feel comfortable and understanding the shift so your business isn't just empty. So, right now, so many people that are laid off, and business owners are trying to figure out how to bring people back in because they're not just going to automatically come back in. They have to showcase, hey, we're taking step A, B, C, and D to make you feel comfortable. Hey, we're open. Come on back in. Our food is still good. You loved our food before. Come back in. And all of our restaurant workers, whether it be the wait staff to the executive chef, have branded materials that everybody still looks the same, but we're going to take care of you with kit gloves, or doctor's level gloves, so you don't have to worry about anything. So you got to make sure that everybody knows that they can trust you and you're mindful of their safety. So just like the slide that James is showing right now, you have you know people don't even realize that the grocery store, those are frontline workers now. So they definitely have to have face masks, and they're dealing with more people almost than the healthcare workers because they're essential. So how do all of these essential workers have what they need? And being down here in Miami, sometimes I've seen these essential workers not have enough PPE or masks, etc. So it's a it's something that everybody's going to have to adapt to. It's not just going to go away next week.
Very good point.
Yeah, next slide. Next slide. We basically have to anticipate and get ahead of this. So that's what James and I have been doing for a couple months. That's what James and I have been doing since we went to Atlanta for that conference and brainstormed this. So we've been ahead of time on this and have been taking a lot of calls and research to get this that everybody's seeing right now. So you guys are getting the benefit of our thinking ahead and dealing with those people in Asia that we work with right now on an everyday basis.
Absolutely.
So you go to the slide where it says anticipate and think ahead.
You got it. And I'll talk a little bit about this, but you do need to anticipate and get ahead. There's clearly going to be ripple effects from COVID-19. So I'm going to take you back in history just a little bit here. So if you guys recall the dot-com bubble from 1999, I won't go into the reasons for the dot-com bubble, but the issues from 2008, the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, actually started from a response to the dot-com bubble in the early 2000s when the Federal Reserve lowered interest rates for the first time to help the economy recover from the dot-com bubble. So what were the ripple effects from that? And you may not be able to see the slide, it's okay, I'm going to talk to it. But by lowering interest rates, the Federal Reserve encouraged people to buy houses. Now, those mortgages from those houses were bundled together to become something called mortgage-backed securities. It's a type of investment that Wall Street investment houses like to sell. It makes a lot of money, mortgage-backed securities. So once they got all the prime borrowers, there's top borrowers with great credit bundled together into these mortgage-backed securities, and they were making so much money off of selling those, they said, hey, we need more of these mortgages to package together into additional mortgage-backed securities. So they really went bottom feeding. They went for the folks who had a lower criteria, with people with lower credit ratings, and said, hey, let's grab those mortgages and bundle them together and keep the same rating on those mortgage-backed securities and sell those as well. Let's keep the money flowing. So in order to entice more mortgages, what was done? They had really good teaser rates. They did variable rate mortgages where you start out with a super low mortgage, sometimes as low as zero in terms of interest rate. And then after 3, 4, 5 years, it balloons up to the actual mortgage rate based on interest rates because it's variable rate. And now you have to pay that new fee. So new home buyers were going, hey, let's just buy the house, not paying the interest for a while, and we'll sell it before it balloons up, right? And what happened, as we know, those teaser rates ran out. People went from paying $1,000 a month for a mortgage to $4,000 a month. You know, it kind of stuck up on them as those teaser rates ran out. They couldn't afford the house that they purchased and had been living in, and then just stopped paying their mortgage. So what's the cascading effect of that? People stopped paying their mortgages. The mortgage-backed securities started failing because the underlying mortgages were no longer good. The investors were losing their money. Now, these Wall Street investment houses are smart. They said, you know, we know that some of these mortgages aren't really strong, so let's get some insurance on this so that if they fail, we know we're safe. So they went with a type of insurance called a credit default swap. If the underlying asset fails, then the company that sold the credit default swap takes on the risk. They'll pay you just the way an insurance company pays you when you get into a car accident. The car accident in this case was a failing investment. The investment failed. The company that sold that credit default swap was supposed to then pay that investment house back for that failure. However, those investment houses were greedy. They were selling so many credit default swaps so that when they all came due, when everyone showed up and said, hey, our investments are failing, pay us, they couldn't pay. They didn't have enough money. It's like an insurance company that doesn't have enough money to pay for everyone who has a claim in the same month. So when that happened, those companies that sold those credit default swaps were going to have to book massive losses and then go out of business. They're going to go bankrupt, or worse than bankrupt, just completely out of business. But because they didn't pay, all those investment companies that were selling these mortgage-backed securities would have to also book massive losses all at the same time and then also go under. The entire financial system was at risk. We almost lost the entire financial system in 2008, 2009 because of this. The point I'm trying to make here is, it's the cascading effect of one thing impacting so many other things. So what causes this is what caused the stock market to fail, for credit to freeze up, for non-finance companies to actually have issues, and we almost lost the entire US financial system. So let's bring it back to COVID-19. What does that really mean for us today? Similarly, we're in an atmosphere where there's a lot of ripple effects coming down the pike, right? So it's not just COVID-19 and the number of deaths that happen and number of people that are scarred for life, mentally and physically, as a result of receiving this particular illness, but it's also how we as a world have responded to it. We stopped global commerce. We've never done that before. We stopped a once thriving world economy in its tracks. And we did so for most of the month of March, absolutely the entire month of April, And so far, it looks like portions of May, we're going to still mostly be stopped, although I see some states are trying to open up. So it's important to understand that with massive unemployment as a result of this, lots of companies closing, that's all lost revenue. That's not coming back. You don't get that back. It's gone. That's gone, wiped off the books, not going to happen again. So we already had a stock market that initially fell by 30%. Looks like it started to come back a little bit. And so I know some people are getting excited, but we need to be cautious at this point. In addition to all of that, supply chain concerns, meat packing facilities were closing because of the number of people. So not only is the meat being packed, but the people working in the meat packing facilities are so closely, closely stacked next to each other. They were passing COVID onto each other, and that caused some other issues. So there's companies that don't have a lot of staff right now because the number of staff are getting infected and have to be out of the office. So supply chain concerns, personal and business bankruptcies are now beginning to surface. This week, we saw a lot of major companies come out with their economics from the first quarter, and overall they were bad as we expected. So if the first quarter was bad and the only month in the first quarter that was affected was March, and it wasn't even the entire month, what's the second quarter going to look like, right? All of April, it will be most of May, and probably some into June as we start to open back up. We already know that the first quarter had a negative 4% rate for GDP. So if that's the case for April, for the first quarter, with just 1 month of, not even a full month of shutting down, what's the second quarter going to look like? We already know that we're in a recession. This is my opinion. I don't give financial advice. I'm going to put all the legalese out there. I don't give financial advice. My opinion, we're already in a recession, and we need to act as such. Okay, so you have to assume that this is just the beginning of the ripple effects. That we can't assume this is over just because the economy is opening back up. There's more to come, and we must begin thinking in terms of years of after effects. So you must anticipate and get ahead of what's coming. So then that brings up the question, is this recession, the greatest recession, a depression, or the greatest depression? I don't think there's any other options. I think this is the debate that's happening now and playing out with some of the economists that are out there. So as I mentioned, a recession is defined as the fall of GDP in 2 successive quarters. So you have negative GDP 2 quarters in a row. You look back and say, we were in a recession from that first quarter that had the negative GDP. It's always in arrears that you determine a recession. So with that said, as I mentioned, this week we learned that GDP for the United States in the first quarter was negative 4%. We already know the second quarter is going to be worse than the first quarter. Therefore, we know we have 2 quarters, at least I know, we have 2 quarters of negative growth, negative GDP. We're in a recession, and we know it today. I know it today. Again, I'm not an investment analyst, none of that. I'm just giving you my opinion. But if you look at the facts, I think you'll be able to determine for yourself that these are also true. So as I said here, that means second quarter GDP numbers have a strong likelihood of also being negative.
Isn't that the technical definition of a recession, 2 successive quarters? So that's not even financial advice. That's simple definition.
It's the definition. Yeah, that's fact. That's fact. And again, first quarter was a partial March, where was the shutdown. For the second quarter, all of April, the entire month of April was shut down. So a partial month of shutdown in the first quarter caused negative 4% growth, when, by the way, the fourth quarter of 2019, we were positive 2% GDP. Part of a month shutdown caused a negative 4%. We know that all of April in the second quarter, and it's going to be much of May, possibly, as states open up, we may have some additional issues if the contagion continues again. We'll have to see. But we know that April was worse than March. So again, I'm personally anticipating that news will come out that says we've been officially in a recession. If that's true, we need to act as such. So if we look here, making matters worse, the unemployment numbers for the last 2 months are far worse than the entire financial crisis of 2008. If you recall the financial crisis of 2008, we topped out at about 10% unemployment. We already know that we're over 30 million Americans that are unemployed. There's only 320 million Americans in the country, and not all of them were in the workforce at that time. So if you look at the Federal Reserve, they put out estimates that unemployment could reach as high as 20 to 25%. That's where we are. That's our reality. That's what we're walking into, and we need to be ready for that. Okay. You see some of these pictures of some of the shelves being emptied here. We need to be prepared for something worse than the financial crisis of 2008, 2009. Preparing for the worst, but hoping for the best. So I'm not saying don't be hopeful. I'm not saying don't be positive for the future, but I think it's easier to prepare for the worst and then realize you didn't need as much preparation as you needed than to need it and not have it. So make sure you guys are preparing for this. Make sure you're thinking about this. Assuming a fast recovery and not preparing will be a terminal mistake for your business and possibly your personal finances.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to prepare yourself for more than toilet paper running out. You got to prepare a bit more than just for running out of TP. And all of James' points are dead on. Everybody has to prepare for supply chain disruption, and we've seen it with dealing with China every day. We know that most of the people that might be looking at this call, most of the things in the house might say made in China on it. So if it does say made in China on it, it had to get here somewhere. So there's a huge supply chain interruption based upon from Chinese New Year's when it started, where they told everybody to stay in, to and then they stayed in. They're more disciplined because they listen to their government. Not to say that their government is right and good, but from this perspective, from the coronavirus, everybody just listened. They didn't do any protesting or anything like that. So they figured it out and kind of isolated in their own way. So not advocating how they did it, but just the fact of everybody did it in unison. And looking at current news, there's a bunch of different people doing interesting protesting, believing, not believing it, etc. It's just affecting our supply chain, and that's the basis of it. And United States is a consumer more than a producer. So if we're more consumers than producers, we gotta, if we're not making it, we gotta either figure out how to acquire it and save, or create the workaround. And we're already seeing massive disruptions in all of the economy. James moved the slide up to where it says coronavirus hits supply chains. So, it's not just China, it's all of Asia, it's all of the world, but its origin is China. So if they're not working, if they're isolated and they're sheltering in place, and we need it, and if there's things that that you need, you should try and get enough for a good amount of time so you don't have to want for it or figure out how to acquire it. We're seeing it every day with a lot of our clients. They're wondering how long it's going to take for things to be shipped. For air shipping, if something was 1 kilogram, so averaging 1 kilogram usually costs $5 per kilogram. Now, air shipping is 3 times the amount. So it costs $15 for 1 kilogram. So if you have to get it really fast, it's going to cost you 3 times as much. And if you need to put it on a boat, well, you're competing with the PPE that's coming over, because their priority is the PPE, because right now, since the whole world needs the PPE and 50% of the masks and the other PPE comes from China, well, they're putting a priority on putting container ships in air to all of this stuff to help the world. So if you have a line of purses, that's just going to have to wait. Whatever it might be, whatever your business is you're going to either have to pay way more or be very patient, or have to be in a position where you're patient to be able to get the items that you need. So you got to prepare yourself, you got to prepare your clients, and just be real with the current situation. And that's just what James and I are advocating, is just being real with the situation, understanding what you have and how you have it, and planning ahead. So, because if you don't plan ahead, you're just gonna be very mad. Because I know I see a lot of people lined up for food trucks, food lines, and it's even BMWs and in the food lines. It's everybody's being affected. The people that have not stacked up and prepared for this, everybody's being affected. There's no person on earth that's not affected. And you better be down with PPE. And if you're not, you're going to have some issues. You're going to have some definite issues. So, hey, James, go to that slide where it says, you down with PPE? You better be. So you can see right here, businesses around the country are installing infrared cameras so they can take the temperature of their staff. So, James, didn't your son just get a new job?
He did. So my son Jordan works at Amazon. He's in their finance management rotation program. It's 10,000 people apply, 20 get it. So he's in an exclusive program. He works in Indianapolis, and what Amazon did was they installed infrared cameras that will take the temperature of people as they come in. So it's non-invasive from the perspective of you need to stop and put something under your tongue. It takes your temperature as you walk in. As long as you don't have a fever, you then go to another table where you get a mask, and then you go to work. And Amazon's been really good about creating social distance within their facilities, but they still have people that are coming down with COVID like everywhere else. If you do have a fever, they pull you to the side and say, go home. Go home and you have to be without a fever for 3 days before you can return to work. So businesses are installing these infrared cameras. I do anticipate that not just office positions or warehouses, I anticipate restaurants potentially doing this, or mall shops, or who knows. There's a new world here where understanding whether someone has a fever or not is going to end up being big business. And I'm sure there are going to be some privacy rights advocates coming out eventually saying that this is invasive and it shouldn't be. But that's the kind of world that we're in right now. We need to really think about.
Exactly. If you can go to the next slide, James, you can see food handlers are prepared to wear disposable face masks, face shields, and gloves. So this is exactly how the people in the back are going to have to look moving forward. You won't be able to see the executive chef's face. So one of the restaurants that I enjoy going to, if you know about meat, the guy's name is Nusret, and he's known as Salt Bay. And Nusret walks around with his glasses on, and he goes around cutting people's meat at their table. From now on, I'm guessing that he's going to have to wear his glasses and have a doctor's mask of some kind to go around and cut the meat for people at their table. So it's a new day for people when they actually can, when you go to a restaurant, the restaurants are just going to look like interesting doctor's offices, and they're going to have to figure out how to brand it so it doesn't look like a doctor's office as much, but to make people feel comfortable. And they're going to have their own supply chain where they're going to have to get their own that works for their clientele. They're going to have hand sanitizer everywhere they go. And if you're client-facing businesses and down with PPE, they better get there fast, because it's all about trust. And right now, people used to say "bless you" when somebody sneezed. Now, when somebody sneezes, people are kind of like, "Ooh, do we have the COVID?" We're going to look around. Nobody's saying "bless you" anymore. If they have a mask on, they might let it slide. But it's a new day, and you got to be able to maintain people's trust and make an establishment where people feel comfortable. So, but to get to that point, take simple things with your health. And James can speak to that point.
Absolutely. You have to fortify your health at this point. So what do we mean by that? Without your health, nothing else matters. So when your health goes, everything else takes a back seat. Unless you're healthy, unless you're feeling good, unless you're feeling strong, everything else is not going to matter as much. So health has to come first. We've always said that, kind of as a nice thing to say, but I think people are starting to understand that it really is a very serious thing to say. Health first, it has to be. So, to succeed, you not only have to be smart, not only do you have to be ahead of the game and watching the trends, but you must remain healthy. That's just critical at this point. We also don't know if COVID-19 can be completely eradicated. There's been some, out of South Korea, for example, we've been hearing that there are some people who originally had COVID-19, and a couple of months later, they're still testing as if they have COVID-19. Is it that the original COVID-19 that they received is still showing inside their body, or did they catch it a second time? Those questions are still outstanding. We don't know that having antibodies for COVID-19 completely means that you won't get it again, or that particular strain again. And we don't know if this is seasonal or a one-time thing or not. So this is something that we might need to be prepared for coming back year after year. We just don't know. We don't have enough data yet, as this is brand new. So just keep your eye on that. So use this time to bulletproof your immune system with healthy foods, plenty of sleep. You must remain hydrated and lots of exercise. Those are the basic 4 things you need to do to stay healthy. Again, we all know this. How many of us really do it? We need to do it now. Okay? So also, you must monitor your emotional and mental health. I'm hearing stories about people committing suicide just from being inside for so long, from these stay-at-home orders. There are people going through emotional turmoil as their household has no income. Both people in the house, or if you're a single family household, single provider household, and you lose your job, or you've been furloughed, which means you're not necessarily getting a package with layoff money coming after a time. People are wondering, what are they going to do? Which is why, as Shannon mentioned, you see such long lines at some of these food banks. So make sure you're safeguarding not only your physical health, but your emotional and your mental health. This is a trying time for everyone, and we all need to just remain engaged with our friends and our loved ones. We need to realistically assess our own personal levels of depression and distress, as well as the people that we care about, and just make sure we look after each other. So that's another key thing in terms of health that we must all do. All right. So now Shannon's going to talk a little bit more about becoming more self-reliant.
Oh, to that point, this slide is really key. The more that we can do for ourselves, the less we need to rely on a system that can fail us. So, if you don't know how to grow your own food, you better look into trying to get some seeds and learn how to make your own onions. My wife is doing some good things here where we're doing this. Like, look, this is on the table, taking onions and making the point where it can eventually grow out, and we can have our own onions, and we don't have to pay $1 a pound. So we got to become self-reliant, and also work with things like your average local farmer. Understand who's in your neighborhood, and you never know what your grocery store is going to have to do. There was an announcement last week that meat is going to be short starting this Friday, or past Friday. So if people need meat and they eat meat and they're not vegan, you better stack up, because you're going to have issues. James, did they talk about Tyson? I think Tyson is either going to have bankruptcy or going out of business because of all of the people that had COVID. I'm not sure.
Tyson closed one or more of their plants in Iowa because of COVID-19. The president has come back out and I guess using some of his emergency powers, said that meat processing plants must remain open. But if you've ever seen the inside of a meat processing plant, you'll see that social distancing is almost impossible. Look at, in your mind, picture long conveyor belts with people shoulder to shoulder, side by side, all taking an action on what's coming down the conveyor belt. So social distancing in that scenario it's been non-existent. And if they are going to do it, it's going to mean slower processing times, which is going to mean less meat coming out of those factories and into the public.
Yeah, and then to that point, even with the vegetables, a lot of vegetables in the United States, they're not made here; they're imported, and these the other countries are having to bury their vegetables because they're going rot, and they're not bringing it in. So it's going to be food shortages all the way around. Do we have to, freak out? No, we can figure out how to make our own or be sustained on what we have, and or pack up and evolve how we need to. Another point, what James has on the slide right now, expect crime to rise. Because when people are hungry and they have no money, they're capable of anything. So, and then police don't automatically show up like that. So you got to be prepared to handle your business. You know, people get scared and desperate, and anything's possible. But to the next slide, James, a criminal is no match for the person that's ready for them. Get ready and stay ready. So if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. You know,
That's right.
and I can speak to James. James is a I'll expose one of his hidden talents. James is a martial arts expert, so he's been ready for years.
It's true. And I agree completely with this slide. You know, the police show up after the crime. If you call a police officer and say someone's about to do something, there's not much they can do. So, you know, you're the first line of defense. You're always your own best first line of defense. Figure out what you're comfortable doing, but make sure it protects you and your family. All right. Here's that's good. Yeah, we're good. So the last thing I want to talk about that we're going to talk about, our last point here, is about monetary change. So the financial crisis of 2008, 2009 taught us what can happen when credit freezes, right? And credit card companies did reduce available credit lines from people who had credit. They took it from people who had credit and then said, okay, you have a $5,000 credit limit, but you're only using $3,000 of your credit. We'll take $1,000 of your available credit and give it to someone who needs it. So that type of work was happening. So just make sure you have cash on hand as well during this time period, because during the time periods of change like this, you need to make sure that you have money on hand in case credit freezes, accounts get restricted, in case anything like that begins to happen. So we want to be ready for potential monetary change. So in the CARE Act, I don't know how many people out there are aware, but in the initial bill of the CARE Act, there was an inclusion to convert the US dollar to become a US digital dollar, something based on the blockchain, something different than what the United States is used to. So that's a warning for you that this is already ready to go. There's actually a congressional team, it's called the Congressional Blockchain Forum, I believe. And they're ready to do this. They already have this ready to go. They're waiting for the right opportunity to allow it to go. So monetary change is something that we do need to be prepared for in case it happens, right? So there's again, this is just one hint that monetary change might be coming, right? So more recently, and this is why I was just the Congressional Blockchain Caucus, right? So again, that same caucus just last week sent a letter to the US Treasury Secretary asking that a blockchain solution be used in the next payments, the next relief payments that are going to be done as a part of COVID-19, as a part of the response. Again, they're really pushing for this. And China, by the way, is already testing their blockchain currency. So this is something that's real that I know people don't think is possible to happen, but it's very real. The last time we had a significant change in our monetary system was 1971. Our currency used to be backed by gold. Our dollar used to say backed by gold, right? It had a comment there. And now it says, it's backed by the full faith and credit of the United States government, So the money in our pocket isn't really money because it's not backed by anything other than trust and faith. It's really currency. And we're going to have to talk about currency versus money another day. But my point is monetary disruption usually happens about every 40 years, and we're overdue. 1971 was the last time we had a monetary disruption in the US dollar, and you can start seeing hints now that one is coming up. So that's important. Some financial analysts believe that the US dollar could lose its place as the world reserve currency to the International Monetary Fund's special drawing rights. This actually is a digital currency. It's existed since 1969, and all the countries that belong to the IMF all participate in special drawing rights. In the last financial crisis, 2008, 2009, the IMF began distributing these special drawing rights to countries that needed it. And it's based on a basket of currencies. So it's not just the US dollar, but also the euro, the pound, the yen. And as of a couple of years ago, the Chinese yuan is also included. So this is a big deal that the IMF has been saying that no country should have the world reserve currency. It should be something based on a number of countries. And the IMF special drawing rights is the one candidate that continues to pop up. So again, just another hint that monetary change is on the horizon, and we need to be prepared for that. Okay. The Fed balance sheet, this is another big deal. So in 2008, let me start with before 2008. You can see in this graph that the Fed balance sheet had less than $1 trillion, right? That was before 2008. you'll see that as we continue through the financial crisis, they started doing something called quantitative easing. That's a nice economic word for printing money. And printing money means you go to a computer, you punch in some numbers, and now you have money to put out there. So we went from less than $1 trillion to over $4 trillion that were printed into existence by the Federal Reserve. Now, normally that would create some monetary issues in the economy, but the Fed was smart enough to also start paying something called interest on excess reserves. That's an interest rate that they paid for banks that kept that money at the Federal Reserve. If you kept it parked there, you were able to get a risk-free interest rate. And banks said, hey, I'd rather have the risk-free interest rate than loan out money into a crisis where people may not be able to pay me back later. So most of that money is still locked up at the Fed. It was never loaned out. And it took us years to get to that point. I believe the QE3 took place in 2013, if I'm not mistaken, or 2014. So from 2009 to 2013, we'll call it, during those years, we printed $4 trillion. In the last 2 months, we printed $6.6 trillion. $6.6 trillion has now been introduced into the economy, with checks going to everyone's household, money available for companies that are failing, people who don't have access to some type of a layoff package. They're now getting some money, and employment's been beefed up. 6.6 trillion. So, and again, it's not just us. Everyone in the world, all the world central banks have been printing money. That by itself is going to cause a monetary shift. So we need to be ready for that. And I'm just going to throw Bitcoin, gold, silver, all great places to you see all of those starting to really escalate. People are realizing, we have some real issues on the horizon, and they're preparing for it. The wealthy are absolutely prepared for this. Are you? Do you know are you prepared for what's coming? Do you have enough insurance in your portfolio that you can weather a financial storm, a secondary financial storm that might come with monetary change? That's going to be important. So
what about the petrodollar point?
Good point. So I just read this morning that if you guys recall, oil went negative for the first time. So oil companies had to actually pay distributors to take the oil off their hands. Oil went negative. So, and that's never happened ever, right? So this is telling you that we're in unprecedented times. So now the theory is that both Russia and Saudi Arabia, who actually created this trade war by continuing to supply the world with lots and lots of oil at a time where no one was using it, a supply glut, to push down the price of oil so that the U.S. Oil producers, who are all do fracking, and they all need about $60 a barrel oil in order to function, they push down the price of oil. The thought now is that the U.S. dollar is what oil is sold in. Saudi Arabia made a deal with the United States years ago that will supply them our army in order to protect the Saudis, as long as they price oil in U.S. dollars. But now the United States is the biggest competitor to Saudi Arabia. The United States is now the number one oil producer in the world. So now the thought is Saudi Arabia at any time could decide, rather than pricing oil in dollars, which would kill us, by the way, because that's really, we really have a petrodollar, they would look to back their oil in something else. Perhaps the Chinese yuan, their new number one client, or perhaps the IMF special drawing rights, who knows? But again, yet another hint of potential monetary change disruption coming, and we need to be prepared for that. So Shannon, could you just talk a little bit about moving forward and, about us a little bit and some things that we could do to help some people?
Awesome. Well, you hit all the key points on the head with that, and anybody that had no clue about what's going on financially in the world, at least they got a nice little overview from us, as well as understanding about how COVID has affected everything. So with our shift, we are about solutions. So like our shift that we had when we went on our trip to Atlanta, we came up with a bunch of different solutions, and we want to offer other people the ability to participate in those solutions as well. So working with us in the different clients that we have, we've established an affiliate program that can be an extra stream of revenue for you. If you do have any clients that fit into our wheelhouse, if you know anybody that might need any mass production sourcing or even some personal protection equipment, restaurant, do you know a restaurant that needs a lot of PPE? Or, I'm sure if somebody knows a McDonald's chain that needs a bunch of PPE for their employees, hey, we can provide that. And if you refer any business to us, then we will break down a percentage of that revenue to you for the life of the client. So it works for anybody that's on this call. And if anybody's revenue challenged right now, you can use your existing relationships to, do some networking with us, and we can make it a win-win. And that's really how we work. We've worked like that since the beginning. Anybody that's referring any business to us, we make it like they're a friend and partner to us. Because as long as that client stays active, we're going to make sure that they stay on the receiving end of that. And that's how James and I work with Metropolitan Strategies. And if anyone would like to talk about any of these points, you can definitely reach out to us, and we'd love to network with you. James, do you have anything else on that point?
Nothing further at this point. Just want to see if there's any questions or comments out there. And again, I appreciate you guys providing some really good comments during our presentation here. And you can see I started replying to some of those. But just reach out to myself or Shannon with any additional questions. We can make this entire deck available if you'd like, and we're at your disposal. If you have any questions or comments, anything you would like to talk to us about, we're ready to do so. What's coming up next is the closeout. So I encourage all of you to listen in to Keith and Manish as they just wrap up these last 2 days of this virtual convention. This was such a wonderful idea, a great way for all of us to engage with each other, talk about our businesses, talk about our ideas, and share knowledge back and forth. So I have a really big thank you to give to both Keith and Manish for putting this together, bringing us all together, and I look forward to the closeout. I'm just going to check one more time to see if there's any additional questions. Got to laugh with the word revenue challenged.
Revenue challenged.
It's a nice way of saying it.
Yeah, a lot of people are revenue challenged right now. It's smoother than saying unemployed. Challenge is something that people can overcome.
Absolutely. I do want to thank also Keith in particular, and also want to talk about Kevin Elliott. These guys are the three of us are in a mastermind group together, and man, these guys teach me so much, and it's just incredible to be associated with both of them. Kevin gave a wonderful presentation yesterday on lies that we tell ourselves in sales, and Keith did a just incredible job, just not only blowing our minds, and he absolutely blew mine, but giving a really good update on how we need to also be preparing ourselves and our businesses for this new normal. So just a special thank you to both of you guys for everything that you do for me personally. And thank you for inviting Shannon and I here to present to you guys. With that said, we're going to go ahead and end, and let's get ready for the closeout. Thanks, guys.
Well, there one more point, James.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
You noticed that Rita wanted to know information on affiliate program. If anybody's interested in being an outside business consultant with us, you can see on the screen our email that you can email is info@metropolitanstrategies.com. And again, info@metropolitanstrategies.com. And again, I'll second what James said. I appreciate Keith for providing the platform. We appreciate all of the people that you've been assisting with this. And, since people are stuck in quarantine, it's a good time to learn. And, a lot of people are using the time to their advantage. Some people aren't, but those people that are using the quarantine time to their advantage, hopefully when this is all subsided a bit, we can come out a better world. So that's really the key. And, I appreciate James. I appreciate everybody here, and looking forward to networking with everybody that's here.
Take care, everyone.